Harabim Tafshin Memches started on Monday, and we're holding chapter 2. So we said that we threw out a lot of information in the first class about the different opinions as to the establishment of Hanukkah. What was the miracle? We talked about the miracle of the victory, the military victory. We talked about the finding of the oil, the burning of the oil for 8 days. So there are a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of discussion among the commentaries, the commentators among the in Halacha as well, in Shulchan Aruch, a lot of discussion about the different parts of it. So there are some moving parts. Our mimer, we're discussing and addressing the question in our mimer that we asked was, why was Hanukkah established for on the 25th of Kislev as opposed to on the 24th, when the 24th is when the military victory occurred, right? Now, having said that, we have to be mindful that if you're going to research, you can do a little research, you'll find that in the Rambam it's clear that the military victory was on the 25th, not on the 24th. So this would follow the opinion of the Meiri. It also follow there's a famous statement in Shulchan Aruch, in the commentaries about Chanukah. Why is it called Chanukah? So one reason it's called Chanukah is the Chanukah Samizbech, the rededication of the temple. Another reason it's called Chanukah is Chanu Chafei. They rested on the 25th, which means, according to that interpretation, the victory was on the 24th and they rested on the 25th. But certainly this would follow the opinion of the Meiri, who says clearly that the military victory was on the 24th and they rested on the 25th. And so our question is based on that. And really, we're coming from Yutas Kislev. We just learned the last time we was a Pada V'Shalom, which is related to Yutas Kislev, Yut Kislev. And in Chassidus, thank you, Moshe, for this incredible spread here, my goodness. Menachem goaded you into it, huh? This is real. This is very serious. I lost my train of thought. You said I got distracted. Right. So we're talking about. We're talking about coming from Yutas Kislev. So Chassidus is all about making peace as well. Pada v'shalom, peace. Peace takes two different things and makes peace between them. So you learn Torah and you see a bunch of different opinions. You see a dispute. One opinion says one thing, one opinion says another thing, and then, even though we know Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, they're all words of Torah and they all are valid, true opinions within Torah, but still they remain distinct opinions, different opinions. In Chassidus, when you go beyond the surface and you go to the deeper, more mystical element of it, suddenly all of these opinions can start getting woven together in a wondrous way. So even though in halacha, in practical application, you either could do X or Y or Z. You can't accommodate all opinions. We try whenever possible to accommodate as much as possible, but ultimately you follow one and not the other. But when we're talking about in the spirit of things, in the spiritual sense, so Chassidus makes peace between all these different things, right? So here we're learning a mimer based on one opinion, but it sheds light on the whole thing, and you see how everything kind of comes together. But okay, that's just parenthetically coming from the time of year that we're in. Just thought I'd mention that. But now we're holding chapter 2. So the question we asked was if the miracle, and again, just also to mention what we talked about again, there are different ways of understanding why Hanukkah was even established. There's an opinion Hanukkah was established because of the miracle of the oil. Another opinion because of right. So our mimer is coming from the position that Hanukkah is established for the military victory. If that's the case, then why establish Hanukkah on the 25th, which is the day they rested, and on the 24th, which is the day of the victory, that the victory occurred? Okay. Mamshech ba mimer, chapter 2. So again, our mimer here, Vata Barachamecha, from the Rebbe from 1987, is based on a mimer that the previous Rebbe said 50 years earlier, in 1937. So in the Friedrich Rebbe's mimer, he continues and he says like this: we were talking about the two miracles, the military victory and the oil victory. So Friedrich Rebbe says that the oil victory, that there were two miracles that occurred with the oil. The miracle of even finding the oil, that they were able to find the oil in the first place, that was a miracle. When did that take place? That takes place on the 25th day of Kislev. Then there was the second miracle of the oil, which is that there was only enough oil to burn for one day and it lasted for 8 days. When did that miracle happen? That started to take shape. That miracle started to become apparent on the 26th.
How come the first one was an is? The second one was an is.
Medayik ba maimer mipnei maloi hukva eze teisves davar b'yem chavav b'kislev shebay huschal nesas bakas Hashem and l'shon yavim. So the Friedrich asks in his maimer, if we have a military victory took place on the 24th, so we ask the question, why are we not celebrating Hanukkah on the 24th if that's the time of the victory and that's what we're establishing Hanukkah for? Then we're talking about the miracle of the oil, and there are two miracles with the oil. There's the miracle of the finding of the oil, and the miracle that the oil lasted for 8 days. The miracle of finding the oil takes place on the 25th. That's when we establish Hanukkah. But the miracle of the oil lasting for 8 days, when did that really become apparent? The next day, on the 26th. So if so, why don't we have some kind of a commemoration for that miracle on the 26th, which is the day that happened? Okay, that's the question. Your question as to why the miracle, why do we call that a miracle?
The real miracle was like 8 days.
Right. It's interesting. There's one of the commentaries, the Emek Shaila says that that Hanukkah was established only for the miracle of the oil lasting 8 days. He says the military victory and the finding of oil were not miracles. They were natural occurrences. They were not miracles. He says that quite explicitly. They weren't miracles, so we're not commemorating them. Those are natural occurrences. But the miracle of the finding of oil, we learned this last year. It was more of a focus on this topic. The idea that finding of the oil was also a miracle. Why? If you look at it from the vantage point of that, they found, first of all, the Greeks were very good at what they did. They come into the temple and they defile all the oil. If you want to say that they found a room that the Greeks didn't know existed, there's a secret, hatch somewhere, and they didn't find there was a whole stash of oil. Okay, so you could say it wasn't a miracle. They were a little clumsy. They weren't as meticulous as they could have been. But the fact that all the oil is defiled and there's only one flask that they find, that was a miracle. That they managed to get 99.9% of the oil, and there's only one that they left. That itself is a bit of a miracle. It tells you something. But if you want to look at it from the Chassidic interpretation, the Chassidic understanding of it, the question is why was there a flask of oil that they couldn't? Yeah, how is it that there was a flask that they couldn't reach? So okay, good. But what does that represent? So that represents the idea that we've talked a lot about in the past time. We talked a lot about Yechida. The last two Mamar, we talked a lot about Yechida. Yechida, we said Babur de Babur Laslu. Yechida has no counter in the unholy, in the ungodly. Excuse me. So the Greeks can defile the oil, but there's the Pach Echad Shem and Chasim Chaysam Shal Gadol. There's the Yechida of the Nefesh. There's the essence of the soul that the Greeks can't reach. So that itself is a miraculous concept. The fact that they were able to access that to find that level. So when you look at it from that perspective, so that's the miracle of the finding of the oil. If you look at it more mystically, but even if you're looking at it rationally and practically, naturally, yes, it's a natural occurrence. It's possible that you overlook something. It's possible that you missed one. But still, the fact that there was one that they overlooked, and the fact that there's one that they managed to find that one, like a needle in a haystack, that itself is a miracle.
This morning, I saw that Abraham J. said they took on the Chumrah. He said under the circumstances.
Right.
That's the miracle that we
Right.
existed. Yeah, we held ourselves to the standard of a Chumrah when.
Right, but that already is related to the next part. Not the finding of it. What's the miracle? That they found it? Saying that they insisted on looking for it. They bothered to look. Yeah. There's a lot to discuss about that as well.
We said about the day we said about Mashiach. Don't we say about Mashiach?
What about Mashiach?
If not Zacher. We still can Mashiach. We're not more willing.
What's okay?
Same with the oil, like you're trying to say. We still not even try.
The Tumah was Hutter B'tzibur. They could have used impure oil, but they were serious. And it's interesting. Chassidus quotes a lot from the Pnei Yeshua, who says that it was the Haris Chibasun Shal Yisrael, that the miracle of the oil is really God showing His love to the people. So we showed our love to Him that we insisted it has to be pure. He shows our love to us by. Right, so we went all out above. I mean, the truth is, if you delve into the topic of Hanukkah and especially that time period and the miracle and the finding the oil, and then so they found the oils, but they were impure. So how'd they light a menorah? The menorah was defiled. So they're using pure oil, but they're impure, so they would contaminate the oil themselves. The menorah itself, if it's impure, that would. So there's it's a whole topic unto itself to discuss and understand, and all these all those moving parts. But okay, this point here that the miracle of the oil lasting 8 days starts on the 26th. There's enough oil for 1 day. So that means that the first day that they lit the menorah, no miracle was necessary, right? So when was the miracle necessary? The second day, the 26th. But really, if you think about it, and the Beis Yosef, there's the famous question, Beis Yosef, why 8 days if the miracle was 7 days? He asks that question, right? If there's enough oil for... So the truth, there are opinions that say that actually there wasn't even... There's a reading, an alternate reading of the Gemara, that they found a flask of oil that didn't even have enough for one day. Okay, so that's an alternate reading. That's not our text in the Gemara. But even according to our text, so there are many answers that are given as to why the holiday is 8 days, right? One actually is that the first day is because they found the oil. We commemorate that on the first day. And the other 7 is for the miracle of everlasting, so it accepts that premise. Fine. But then, so that's one answer. Another answer is that the oil they put in, a drop of oil, or that the oil at the end of the day didn't burn. Either way, that there was a miracle. So the Beis Yosef gives a bunch of answers, and everybody after him also continues to pile on answers and explanations as to why it was that the miracle was 8 days. So the Rebbe said, so if that's the case, so it's not really such a strong question. Based on the wealth of answers that we have as to why the miracle, the oil miracle was 8 days, so we can answer why it wasn't chavav, it was chafei. So the Rebbe says in note 14, where we have all these answers. So if that's the case, so then what's really the question here? Why the 26th? So really, already the miracle really did start on 25th. So the Rebbe says, perhaps you could say to reconcile what the Friedrich Rebbe says in his Maimer with the answers given by the commentaries as to why the miracle of the oil also was on the first day, on the 25th. He says you could say that when he says that the miracle starts on the 26th, what he means is hakavana b'zeh he shenez zeh haya b'shvil hadlaka d'chavav. Even if you want to say that the miracle started on the 25th, but why was there a miracle necessary on the 25th? So that the oil could last for 8 days. So really, in other words, if there was other oil, then there wouldn't need to be a miracle even on the 25th. So even if you want to explain that the miracle already took place on the 25th, it was really only because of the 26th, because of the subsequent days that was even required for that first day. Right? So the question still remains that the miracle of the oil was necessary for the 26th and beyond. And if so, why is it that on the 26th we don't have any special commemoration for that miracle? Okay, Gimel. So the Friedrich Rebbe in his Maimer, here's the point of his explanations. That we're going to put the miracle of the 8 days, the oil burning for 8 days aside, and we're going to focus on the first 2 miracles. The miracle of the victory, which according to our Maimer, we're referring to that as a great miracle, and the miracle why the Chanukah is established. So that miracle is Yichud Tata, and the miracle of finding the oil is Yichud Ilah. What is Yichud Tata? What's Yichud Ilah? So the translation of Yichud Tata is the lower level unity, and the translation of Yichud Ilah is the higher level unity. So now you know. So what's Yichud Tata and what's Yichud Ilah? So when we talk about God's oneness, God's unity, we live in a world of fragmentation, right? So how do we say God is one? So there's a lower level of unity and there's a higher level of unity. Yichud Tata, Yichud Ilah. Yichud Tata means that I look at all of reality, I look at all of the creation, and I recognize that it doesn't have its own independent existence. That it's totally dependent on God. That He is the only true entity, the only true existence. Right? Because all of existence exists inside of Him. So, and the example that's given to understand this in Chassidus is the example of throwing a stone, right? A stone is an inanimate object that doesn't move. It sits on the ground. That's what a stone does. You pick up the stone and you throw it. What happens? Now the stone is flying, right? So when the stone is flying, could you call it a flying stone? Does it turn into a bird? No. The stone remains a stone that doesn't move. Why is it flying? Because there's an outside force that's propelling it. And what's the proof that the stone itself is not flying? It's only an outside force that's propelling it. The moment that the outside force dissipates and is no longer present in the stone reverts back to exactly where it came from. It goes back to just being a stone that doesn't move. Right? So the stone's movement is not any kind of independent existence. The stone itself is a non-moving entity. But the moving is something that comes from the source outside of it. So the same is true with creation. We look at creation, we see existence. But existence's true nature is non-existence. It only exists because there's an outside force that's bringing it into existence. That's called Yichud Tata, the lower level of unity. That there's a world that we see that exists, but we recognize that its true existence is only God willing it into existence. Why is this the lower level unity? Why do we call this the lower level unity? Because, in the end, there's still an existence. Going back to the analogy of the throwing of the stone. If I throw a stone, and you throw a stone, right? We're both throwing stones, hopefully not at each other, and when you see the stone in flight, you can get a sense of the strength of the person who throws the stone, right? The stronger I am, the further I can throw it, right? Or the heavier the stone that I can throw, right? So you could see something about the person who's throwing the stone within that thing. So the stone itself, as a flying stone, does matter, is significant, right? In fact, I could see something, it tells me something about the stone thrower when I look at the stone, right? So in a sense, the throwing of the stone and the stone's flight is significant in that it expresses my ability to throw it, my strength, right? So the same is true with reality. We look at the world, we see a creation, what does that tell us? So we say in Daven, L'cha Hashem HaGedula, Gedula is a Ma'aseh Bereishis. God is great because He could create such a universe. So true, the universe itself doesn't have its independent existence, but it's significant. It's significant in the sense that it points to a great creator. So therefore it's Yichud Tata, that even though there's a world that we say doesn't have its own independent existence, still you'd call that a Bittul Hayesh. It's an existence that's nullified, that's subdued, totally subservient to its creator, totally dependent on its creator, but it's still in existence. Then you have the higher level unity, Yichud Ilah. What's Yichud Ilah? The Zohar says, we just said that L'cha Hashem HaGedula, greatness, God's greatness is Ma'aseh Bereishis, that He creates, right? L'cha Hashem HaGedula is Ma'aseh Bereishis, His greatness. But we also, Chazal say, that b'makom shatamaytze gedula se'atamaytze anvasanusay, that where you find God's greatness, you also find His humility. Why? Because like the Zohar says, it's not appropriate for the king to be busy doing simple things. Put it in other terms, going back to the analogy of the throwing of the stone, standing and throwing stones all day doesn't tell you anything about my personality, doesn't tell you anything about my intelligence, right? Or it tells you very little about it. So the throwing of the stone is something that's really beneath me, or it doesn't really get to anything that's higher. So here already, when we talk about the world pointing to the Creator, so that's Bittul Hayesh. But then you recognize that God is really beyond that as well. God is beyond just being a creator of a world. On some level, on a higher level, the world is a non-entity. It doesn't exist at all. It doesn't exist. That's where you find God's real greatness. On a level beyond all of reality, where the world is non-existent. And so on that level, that's Yichud Ilah, that's the higher level of unity, where it's not that you recognize that the world itself exists within God, but that the world itself is a non-entity, non-existent. The world itself, its existence is nothing. It's nothing to God. That's Yichud Tata's contingent existence. That's the contingent meaning is totally always nullified to its creator. So that's a contingent existence. So it tells that's Yichud Tata, the lower unity. But the higher level is where it itself is non-existent. The stone itself, going back to that analogy, it doesn't tell you anything about its creator. The creator exists on a level where the stone is totally irrelevant. And even the ability to throw the stone is a lower level. The fact that I have a talent that I can throw stones, that's a low level talent. I'm so much beyond that, so much greater than that, right? The throw of the stone. And the same is true with God. That creation is God lowering Himself down to be a creator, but really He exists on a plane that's even beyond that. That's Yichud Ilah. So He says in the Maimer that the war, that was Yichud Tata, the lower unity. The finding of the oil, that's Yichud Ilah, the higher unity. Why is that? We mentioned before about boom. This never happened before. Huh? The tripod is getting excited. So the victory, the military victory, was a natural. It was something that we mentioned before about from the Emek Shaila about how that he doesn't regard the military victory or the finding of the oil as a miracle. They're all natural occurrences, right? But let's look at that for a second. The military victory was a miracle. We say it in Val Anissim, we acknowledge that miracle, right? The many in the hands of the few, right? The mighty in the hands of the weak. Right. Okay. Very good. But so on one hand, there was a battle that took place. There was guerrilla warfare, right? In fact, students of war and war strategy might be able to go back and look at the strategies that were employed by the Maccabees to defeat the mighty army, and they might even be able to learn something. Now they might come to a conclusion that you can't duplicate it, that it's totally beyond. But still, it's something that can be analyzed and studied. Why? Because ultimately the war plays out in the physical arena, in the natural world. So even if it was a supernatural victory, even if the victory was highly improbable, like you said, right? But it's still something that plays out in the natural occurrence. It's still something, God working through the dictates of nature, through the laws of nature. Like the Six-Day War. I was just thinking the same thing, yeah. Right. And at first people were under the awe of it being a miracle, and then eventually they started to... we have standards. So the military victory, that's Yehuda Tata, the lower level unity. There's nature, but nature is subservient to God. So I fight a natural war. If I want to vanquish my enemy, I have to go to war with him. But since God pulls all the strings, so therefore I can win that war. But still, it plays out in the natural arena. And you still have to show up exactly. And you just have to employ some kind of strategy. I mean, it wasn't like they were just, they were doing something. But then you have the miracle of the oil, finding the oil. We said, what was the miracle of finding the oil? The way Chassidus explains it, the miracle of finding the oil represents a level of godliness in which there is no opposition. There's oil that the Greeks can't defile. And specifically, as we understand it, Chazal tells us that it's chosim b'chaysamish HaKohen Gadol. There's this idea of the Kohen Gadol, the seal of the high priest. So Chassidus explains the seal of the high priest, as it relates to the spiritual, the Sikha, the Rebbe talks about, he asks a question about how is it that Hashem was able to be mitama, Hashem was able to, it says, we know that you have to bury the dead, because Hashem buries the dead. He was involved in the burial of Moshe Rabbeinu. But we know that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become pure, even to family members. So as great as Moshe Rabbeinu was, you want to call him a son, or whatever, how is Hashem, if Hashem is a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to become impure. So how is Hashem allowed to deal with burying Moshe Rabbeinu? Right? That's a interesting question. And it's based on the premise that Magid Dvar V'Yakov Chuk Mishpat Yisrael, that Hashem observes the commandments that He commands us. So if He tells a Kohen Gadol he can't become impure, and Hashem is a Kohen Gadol, so how it happens. It explains the point. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but the point is that there's a level of Kohen Gadol. The level of Kohen Gadol is one that's impervious to impurity. It can't become impure. That's the level of Kohen Gadol in heaven. There's a level of Kohen Gadol where impurity doesn't have any effect. Kohen Gadol can't become impure. However, Kohen Gadol, as he is a human being in this world, well, he's susceptible. The limitation of a human being means that even a human Kohen Gadol is susceptible to impurity. And since Kohen Gadol is something that should not have any kind of impurity, so Kohen Gadol has to be careful in this world. But Hashem, as he's Kohen Gadol, could bury the dead and not become impure. Right? So this idea that we said that the flask of oil was sealed with the seal of the high priest represents a level that's not susceptible, it's not vulnerable to impurity. And putting in other terms, more familiar terms that we've been using in the last couple of Mamarim, is Yechida. That Yechida has no counterpart in the unholy. So here already, what does that show us? That represents a level of Yechudei. That's a level of godliness where there is no otherness. There is no world. There's just God. Right? So that's how we see that the miracle of the victory of the war, the military victory, that's Yehuda Tata. That happens in the physical arena where there's an enemy and you have to fight the enemy and you ultimately overcome the enemy. But then there's Yehuda Ilah where there is no enemy. There's a level of godliness where there's only God and there is no, the world is bittul b'mitzias. There's no, the world is a non-entity, non-existent. Nothing could challenge it, okay? Now, this is then the meaning of why the military victory takes place on the 24th day of Kislev, and the finding of the oil happens on the 25th of Kislev. Why? When we daven, we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Baruch Shem Kved Malchusei Le'elam Vad. Right? Shema Yisrael is Yisrael, Baruch Shem is Yehuda Tatav. What does that mean? When we say Baruch Shem Kved Malchusei Le'elam Vad, what are we doing? All those words of Baruch Shem are all a drawing. Blessing, you try to Now, name is for something else. So why do I have a name? So you can identify me, right? Right? Glory, also something that extends outside myself, right? Honor. La'olam va'ed, to time and to space, right? So it's all about bringing an awareness of God into the physical. That's why Baruch Shem is referred to as Yichud Tata. It's a unity of God as He's one within reality, within the world. So that's Yichud Tata. Shema Yisrael, what do we say? God is one. There is no world. That's Yichud Eilah. That God is one, that the reality is a non-entity. That's Shema Yisrael. Baruch Shem has 24 letters. That phrase, that line, Baruch Shem, 24 letters. So we see that Baruch Shem which relates to Yichud Tata. So the miracle of the victory, which is Yichud Tata experience, that happens on what day? The 24th. A reference to the 24 letters of Baruch Shem, and the victory and the miracle of the finding of the oil, which we just explained, is Yichud Eilah, the higher unity. When does that take place? On the 25th. The 25th, there are 25 letters in Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is this idea of Yichud Eilah. How convenient, right? But we mentioned there's another miracle. There's a third miracle. The miracle of the oil lasting for 8 days. When did we say that miracle really kicks in? On the 26th. So that miracle that happens on the 26th, we know what's 26. Chavav is B'gematria Havaya. 26 is the numerical value of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem's name, which is Hulamayla Gam Yichud Eilah. That Havaya, that's even higher than Yichud Eilah. How is there something higher than Yichud Eilah? So explains that. What time is it? 5 minutes? It's 10 or it's 5? Tagam Yichud Eilah. Hu b'shem Havaya Havaya Echad, k'mur b'kam k'am b'shabitul shemitzad Shem Elikim hu bitul hayash Yichud Tata v'abitul Yichud v'abitul b'mentzias hu dafke mitzad Shem Havaya. You know what? We're going to have to leave this for the next class. We're not going to make a run for it. But define. Right, so I guess we didn't address that now. But again, to sum up, though, we're saying that there's 3 miracles here. There's the military victory, there's the miracle of finding the oil, and there's the miracle of the oil lasting 8 days. And these represent 3 stages of God's interaction or states of godliness. There's Yichud Tata, the lower unity, which doesn't dismiss the reality of the universe. It simply says that it's one that's nullified to God. That relates to Baruch Shem Kohen Malchus. That miracle happens on the 24th. Baruch Shem Kohen Malchus Yichud Tata. There's the miracle of the finding of the oil, which we said, how is there an oil that was not contaminated? Because there's no unholiness, there's no challenge to that level of godliness. Yechida, that's Yichud Eilah, the higher level of unity. That happens on the 25th, the 25 letters of Shema Yisrael. And then there's even higher than that, Shem Havaya, the 26 letters of God's name, which represents the miracle of the 8 days, the oil lasting for 8 days. How is that there's higher than Yichud Eilah? What does that mean? And also, we know in the Shema Yisrael, we say Havaya. So what exactly that means, that we have to address, Mr. Shav.